Welcome to the Save California Salmon and HSU Native American Studies Advocacy and Water Protection Summer Speaker Series and Certificate Program. Really happy to see people here today and excited about our panel that we have coming up. Just a few housekeeping things for everyone. We would like to encourage you and remind you that we will be sending out evaluation forms for the session. If you are registered for the certificate series, it would be really great to fill those out. That helps us with what we're doing next, and that also helps to count toward, have it so that this webinar counts toward your certificate program. The second thing is that we're also live on Facebook, and so if you're watching live on Facebook, thank you so much for joining us. We do have on the webinar section at the bottom, there is a little button that's called Q&A. If you have questions throughout the webinar, we encourage you to write your questions into the Q&A, and we will address questions at the end, depending on how much time we have left. That helps us to be able to also monitor questions, but to see if there's anything that we need to follow up on later. To begin, I wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us today, to let you know that I am joining you from Wiyot territory on the coast of California, Northern California in Humboldt County. And my name is Dr. Cutcha Risling Baldy. I am the Department Chair of Native American Studies. I'm also Hupa Yurok and Karuk and enrolled in the Hupa Valley Tribe. And the partnership that we've created this summer with Save California Salmon has been a really amazing opportunity for us to kind of help to create educational things for people to engage in as we're in this very sort of unprecedented time of COVID and things that are happening throughout the world. I think a time of great change and inspiration as well. And we want to acknowledge that the fights that people are continuing throughout the United States and different nations to be able to uphold Black lives and to be able to say that we find connections across all of our communities to be able to protect our futures. I'm looking forward to kind of the things that these opportunities will create in the future and the conversations that we're going to be able to have because we've been able to bring everyone together. Today, we are going to take some time. We're going to talk about the Eel River. So the title of today's webinar is Bringing Salmon Home, Eel River Dam Removal. We have a number of panelists here with us today that I'm very excited to hear from. And I wanted to let people know that if you have, if you're interested in the handouts or the things that people will be showing today, we will be putting them up on the Save California Salmon website. So you can visit their website and you'll be able to download the things that people are showing, the presentations. And also, we will be putting up additional resources. So if you have questions about readings or things, we usually put them up on the website. So please feel free to check the website if you can. And we will also be able to address like sort of any follow-up things via the website as well. So it's really good to check in on the website. If you haven't followed HSU's Native American Studies program on Facebook, that's also a really great place to get information. So if you look us up on Facebook, HSU Native American Studies, we'll be posting the live videos there and some additional resources and follow-ups about what's happening with the series throughout the summer. So I'm really looking forward to all the ways that we're going to be engaging with the Eel River today. I wanted to do a very short, very quick introduction to the Eel River, just a little bit more information. I'm sure people saw some of the things that we put out. I am going to share my screen so you can see a quick photo. Some of our speakers might be going over some of this information more in detail, but this is just to help everyone kind of get in the same page about the place that we're talking about today. So let me do that really quick. Okay. This photo right here, or this picture right here shows you the Eel River Watershed, which is where we're sort of placing ourselves today. Although we all need to acknowledge as we kind of move forward with things that, you know, any watershed that we're talking about also affects the number of that exist throughout California and the nation. Waters are interconnected to each other. But when you're thinking about the Eel River Watershed, you're looking at primarily the southern part of Humboldt County, reaching all the way down into Lake County. It is the third largest watershed in California. And And so we're looking at a number of interconnected rivers that are also part of this system as well. So this is to help kind of orientate you to the space that we are in right now, to kind of tell you a little bit about what we're going to learn about. We have two tribes who have joined us today to talk about some of the things that they're working on with the Eel River. That includes representatives from the Wiyot tribe and also the Round Valley tribe. I think that it gives us an opportunity to kind of see how these issues affect multiple nations and groups of people. And then you also get to see how many different stakeholders are involved in these major issues. And so when you're thinking about where we're at right now, this is where we are. Many of you, I'm sure, are joining us from Humboldt County and are readily familiar with the Eel River and how important it is and how beautiful it is and how central it is to our spaces and our peoples. But for those of you who are joining us from further away, this is sort of the area that we are going to be in today and what we're going to be learning about. To set some additional context, the Eel River is the third largest watershed entirely in California. It covers an area twice the size of Sonoma County. It has both state and federal wild and scenic river designations to protect the more than 350 miles of waterways from additional damming. Historically, the Eel River's fish population was said to have reached over 1 million in good years, but now averages about 2,000 steelhead, 1,000 Chinook, and 500 coho salmon, close to a 99% reduction in numbers of fish on the Eel River. The history of the Eel River includes a decline due to canneries from the late 1800s, logging, which included unregulated logging that swept through the watershed. It also caused massive amounts of erosion and floods, and then deposited a lot of sediment in the riverbed, which adversely affected the river's fish population. There was then an introduction of invasive species into the watershed. And if you look at the Eel River over the past 10 years, there have been some summers where the river has run dry and where salmon and steelhead have faced extinction events because of the state of the watershed. Water from the Eel River currently is diverted to eastern Mendocino and Sonoma counties, where it supports a $34 million agricultural industry and supplies over 600,000 municipal water users. The 21% flow diverted from the Eel after PG&E's diversions is then further siphoned by things like illegal marijuana grows. So there's a number of issues that are pushing down on top of the Eel River right now. I think a couple of people today are going to talk about the PG&E's Potter Valley project. In 2018, PG&E announced that they were going to be putting the Potter Valley project, what they called, up for bid, where any entity could bid to buy the project and operate the facility for hydropower or just for the benefits of diverting water to the Russian River, or both. The Potter Valley project consists of 2 dams located on the Eel River that divert water out of the watershed into the Russian River. The Cape Horn Dam was built in 1908 and is equipped with a fish ladder. The second dam is the Scott Dam, which was built in 1922 and creates the Lake Pillsbury Reservoir. The Scott Dam lacks any fish passage and prevents migrating salmonoids and other species from accessing about 10% of the Eel River watershed. So today we're going to hear from a group who are able to speak to some of the larger issues that are happening on the Eel. We'll look at how the Eel is home to the Round Valley and Wiyot tribes, along with Sherwood Valley and Bear River Rancheria. It's a river where tribes and fishermen have not been able to fish for salmon for decades due to the dwindling salmon populations because of dams and diversions to grow wine grapes on the Russian River. This has led to a lot of food insecurity issues in one of the most remote watersheds in California. The panel today is going to discuss efforts to take down the Eel River dams, to reduce diversions to the Potter Valley irrigation project on the Russian River, and we'll touch on the needs to control diversions for marijuana, to restore flows for salmon, and efforts to return land to tribes in Northern California. So I'm honored to introduce our first speaker. I forgot how to say her first name, I'm sorry.
Hilanea.
Okay, Hilanea Wilkinson. She's the Wiyot Tribe Natural Resources Department representative. She's going to share a presentation with us. If you give us a couple seconds to get that set up, then we can get started.
Okay, can you guys all see it? Perfect. So just wanted to start out saying I am not a scientist, but I was raised with a really traditional family. We would go out and gather, hunt, fish, all that. My grandmother, Leona, I'm sure you've all heard of Cheryl Seidner, my aunt, and she taught me a lot and told me stories about their family. And there's a good photo. And I found this photo of Firm Bridge in the Eel River in 1915, and you can see how high the water was back then. And this was before all the dams were there. Here's another photo. I couldn't find when this was. And this is another photo I found for taken a couple of years ago at Firm Bridge, also during our big drought. There's no water. And as Cutcha said, the Scotts Dam was built in 1922, Cape Horn Dam was built in 1908. And historical records suggest that the Chinook salmon runs were about 100,000 to 800,000 fish per year. And the first half of the 20th century, the runs were only about 50,000 to 100,000. And I wanted to use this as an example of the San Clemente Dam on the Carmel River between the Big Sur Hills and the beachfront of the town of Carmel. This was the first dam removal project in California history. This one was built in 1921 and they removed it in 2016. And the fish are already returning. In 2016, there was none of them have returned, but there was a few, I think there was like 16 returned in the next year. And so far there's 123 steelhead that have traveled upriver. With the salmon, humans are not the only animals that benefit from the salmon. And when the fish die, they decompose in the water and eat them. And when they're going upstream in the river, after they spawn and they die, lots of scavengers, bear, raccoons, foxes, seals, waterfowl, and they eat the carcasses also. And there's studies that have shown there's a lot of marine nitrogen that could be found in the feathers of the birds. And salmon is very important to everybody around here. It is a staple for all the tribes, and the tribes take what we need, and we don't waste anything. We'll use everything, and if we don't, we give it back to the earth. We give thanks, there are ceremonies, and we don't waste. We don't catch them just to sell it and make money, as much money as we can. My Aunt Cheryl told me a story. She cannot remember where she found it, where it came from, but she vaguely remembers it. The salmon ceremony in the spring, the tribes would place the salmon in a pit with leaves and cook it. And when the fish is almost done, they have a runner run it up into the mountains and to finish the cooking, and they leave it there. And that is their way of giving thanks. And to end my presentation, the return of the salmon would greatly benefit everybody in California, animals, humans, everything. Removing the dams after several generations, when we can help the river heal and prosper. Not just the tribes and commercial fishing, but it would mean a healthier ecosystem and animals around the waterways. And we wouldn't have all that the algae blooms, the toxic algae, everything like that. The way the river is deteriorating is causing experts to hypothesize the extinction of some of the salmon species within 50 years. And I also wanted to say that I'm working with the tribe this summer and with last summer, and we were doing pike minnow suppression to try to find out why lots of the salmonoids are not prospering in the river, and I'm trying to find a way to help the minnows. And that is it. The photo I found.
Thank you very much. we're excited to be able to offer some time at the end, just if everybody knows for questions. And so we'll be able to follow up on a number of the issues that people introduce. And it'll be an opportunity to kind of engage with some of the tribes that are really doing this work on the watershed to learn more about why it is so important for them to be able to restore this, not just as we're talking about for cultural purposes, just in general. So thank you very much for that presentation. And again, if you have questions, please bring the Q&A section to the bottom of your screen, click on Q&A. You should be able to enter in questions. Our next presenter is Scott. He is from the Friends of the Eel River. And I know that he's going to put up. So I'm set up and then he can start with his presentation.
Thanks, Cutcha. Can you all hear me? Make sure you can hear me. Yes? Okay, good. All right. Thanks, everybody. And I want to apologize in advance for the boringness of this presentation. It's been kind of a crowded week and I wasn't able to get good illustrations in here. I just want to start by saying how much I appreciate the chance to raise my kids in a place where indigenous cultures persist. It's really important. And it's a great honor to be on a panel with somebody who was my daughter's classmate. This gives me a lot of hope. So thank you all for being here and for the work you're doing. What I want to do today is just talk real quickly about where we are in a very, very complicated nest of agency processes and lay out what look like some of the most likely places we're going to be going from here. And I want to start with not the plan, but the two-basin solution idea, which is something that was articulated by our Congressman, Jared Huffman, and gives us really the foundation on which all of this work is built. And let me see if I can share. I'm doing a crummy job of sharing properly. Well, never mind. Go to pottervalleyproject.org and you can see what I'm talking about there. The point of the two-basin solution is that we're in a place where there's no obvious way to get the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the agency in charge of relicensing the Potter Valley Project and its two dams, to fix the problems that the Potter Valley Project has created. But we saw an opportunity to pursue the potential for a real compromise between Russian River and Eel River interests that would rest on basically securing fish passage on the eel in exchange for securing a continued diversion to the Russian River. So that's the basic idea, the co-equal goals of the two-basin solution. The last several years have seen a very rapid series of events during which PG&E, which owns the dams, has first tried to relicense them, then abandoned that relicensing effort, and then, but in the middle of that, actually tried to auction off the whole project. After PG&E abandoned the relicensing effort, following their burning down the town of Paradise and going bankrupt, three of the groups that have been at the core of the two-basin solution talks and the ad hoc group that Jared Huffman convened came together to try to put together a bid to continue the relicensing project and pursue a real two-basin solution. Those groups were Sonoma Water, the Sonoma County Water Agency, now called Sonoma Water, Caltrout, and the Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission. There's a lot more to say about the Inland Water and Power Commission. The most important thing is that it is constituted of a series of Mendocino County interests, including the Potter Valley Irrigation District. Humboldt County later joined that group, and that group was explicitly founded with an invitation to the Round Valley tribes to join it. That's the group that's now come forward with the feasibility study report that was filed in May, and that I'm going to be talking about a little bit here. Comments on that report are going in right now. They appear to be due Monday at the latest, but everybody seems to be treating it as Sunday, which is weird, but that's a different problem. The basic idea of the feasibility study report is that we propose, this group proposes to remove Scott Dam. It proposes to do that by taking over the whole project, remove Scott Dam, fix the fish passage at Cape Horn, and continue the diversion in the wet season. So we're moving what has been a summer diversion to a wet season diversion. The feasibility study report also proposes a pipeline to take water back from the Lake Mendocino Reservoir uphill to Potter Valley to supply their water needs. There are some real problems with this plan. In general, it's really easy to solve problems if you've got an unlimited amount of money. Of course, what looked like a budget surplus for the state last year now looks like a serious budget deficit. That's going to be much harder to raise money in that context. As well, the feasibility study report doesn't yet define how we're gonna solve the problem of fish passage at the Cape Horn Dam and the Van Arsdale Fish Ladder, which is the tallest and the longest fish ladder in California, and it's not one that works particularly well. As well, we're concerned about who would control the regional entity. We're particularly concerned that a regional entity could be set up and then basically run out of money and decide to keep Scott Dam in place. And I gotta say that overall dynamic throughout this series of negotiations has been that the water users of the Russian River, particularly Potter Valley, don't want to pay. They've had free or very cheap water for a century. They don't want to pay for solutions. They don't want to pay more for their water. And it's becoming clear now in the responses to the feasibility study report that many of those water users still don't agree that Scott Dam needs to come out. So we have a real problem because we're trying to build a regional consensus to move forward with this idea. And the folks who are supposed to benefit from it don't seem to want it. So if this plan fails, which is now a real possibility, then I'm not sure it's likely, it's possible. The other main route ahead of us, the formal the formal path before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is its surrender process. PG&E would go into that. Now there's ways that PG&E could resist dam removal, but we think they won't for a lot of reasons, starting with the fact that PG&E has effectively renounced its ability to relicense these dams, and continuing through the very, very serious impacts these dams have on Eel River salmonids, especially steelhead and chinook. So we think we would prevail in that argument. And PG&E, if it has a order from FERC to remove the dam, it can then go to the California Public Utilities Commission, which regulates its rates, and is likely to be allowed to recover the costs of dam removal plus a standard profit for all the money it spends on dam removal. So looks like a way that would get dam removal done. PG&E is going to get paid to do it. And the very high cost that PG&E is bearing right now, $5 to $10 million a year in operation and maintenance costs alone for Scott Dam, mean that it doesn't really have an incentive to just stall and keep the thing in place. It's going to keep costing the company money, which it doesn't have. But there are some real downsides to the surrender process. It's worth noting. All the stakeholders that are gathered in the ad hoc group and the the smaller version, the planning agreement group, would really be outside that process. And we wouldn't necessarily have a secure timeline to resolve this, so it could go on forever. So there's another option, maybe, which I'm thinking of as sort of version 2.0 of Plan A, still trying for a two-basin solution that would secure dam removal in exchange for a continued wet season diversion. And one way we could do that would be to redraw the Potter Valley project to take Scott Dam out, leave that in PG&E's lap. They go to FERC for the surrender process. The regional entity gets the rest. But they still have to figure out how to get that volitional passage, the ability of fish to move upstream and downstream when they want it at Cape Horn Dam. And we still have to figure out how to pay for it, which is a big, big ticket. So, I want to emphasize that the events of the last 5 years have basically eroded the already weak position of Scott Dam proponents. It is now very clear that Scott Dam will be removed one way or another. Our position at Friends of the Eel River is very clear that Round Valley Indian tribes' rights must be secured in any such resolution. One of the things we're going to be looking for is the principle that those who benefit from the diversion of Eel River water bear the costs. That's particularly important because this is formally a hydroelectric project, but it loses a lot of money on every watt of power it produces. So the water is going to have to pay the freight here. Another point is that we're going to need more transparency to move forward in this process. We haven't yet seen publicly, for example, the feasibility study itself. We've only seen a executive summary report of that. So we're looking ahead to an additional agreement called the cooperative agreement that's going to be negotiated and signed between the planning agreement parties. That's going to resolve many of the questions that are still outstanding. And we're going to be looking ahead for the question whether they're able to secure the $10 to $15 million that it looks like will be needed to finish study plans and finish the relicensing process before FERC. Really, the only source for that money is PG&E. So there's probably a big turning point ahead in the next 6 months. So stay tuned. It's going to be really interesting. So that's what I got. How do I turn that off?
Here, I'll turn it off for you.
Gotcha.
Let's see.
I lost my screen. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing all of that really important information about what's going on right now. I know that a lot of the people who we've been working with throughout this seminar series have been writing that they like to know what's happening right now and some of the things that they can do. So I'm hoping that when we come back for the Q&A, you might have some suggestions of what people could do to participate in this process, or like where they should sort of focus their efforts. That's been one thing that they've really been thinking about as we've been going through this webinar series. So our next speakers are representatives from the Round Valley Indian tribes. We have James Russ and Kathleen Willits. They do not have a presentation. Will be speaking to us via the phone. So go for it.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. First, before I begin, I would like to give thanks to our Creator for this day and for the opportunity to address some of the issues to all of the listeners that are listening in on today. I would also like to acknowledge our tribal neighbors to the north, the Wiyot tribes, our fellow Eel River tribes. So, good afternoon again. My name is James Russ. I am Wailaki on my dad's side and Wailaki Namalaki on my mother's side. I'm an enrolled member of the Round Valley Indian Reservation, and currently I'm the tribal president of the Round Valley Indian Tribes. The Tribal Council is the elected governing body of the Round Valley Indian Reservation. Excuse me. The Round Valley Indian Reservation was established by executive order in or around 1873. We are one of the 5 original reservations in California. Our tribes include the Yuki tribe, which was indigenous to this area of Round Valley, the Wailaki tribe, which was brought in from the north of the valley up in the Long Ridge area and extending out to the coast, the Namalaki tribe, which came over the Mendocino National Forest in one of the forest relocation marches that was done for this reservation. We reenact that march every year. It's called the Numcolt Walk. The Kunkau tribe, the Wintun tribes, which also came from over the valley, and then the Little Lake and Pomo tribes, which came from south of the valley, down in the Lake County area and also extending out to the coast. So those are the 7 tribes that make up Round Valley Indian Tribes. Round Valley is one of the oldest, largest land-based reservations in California. We currently have 5,099 enrolled members, and we have approximately 32,000 acres of land that's located on the north end of the valley floor in Round Valley, and it extends out into the mountain areas out to the north of the valley, the north, the west, and the northeast. Our reservation boundaries for the reservation mainly are formed by the Eel River. On the eastern side, and it swings around to the southern side, is the main fork of the Eel River, and in our northern boundary is, for the most part, formed by the north fork of the Eel River. So basically, our reservation is surrounded on all sides by the Eel River. So regarding our tribal ties to the Eel River, our tribes in this area have utilized, mainly for fishery and subsistence, the Eel River since the beginning of time. The fishery has been a major part of our lives, and for all of our tribes in this area, and for those that came in that were forced in later. All of our families on the reservation that have been here for many, many years have many stories over the years of fishing and utilizing the Eel River. So earlier on in the presentation, it was mentioned that there may have been 1 million fish that came with the Eel River. So I just wanted to share just a very quick story. One such story, and this is including my own family, is that when the fish would run in the fall and the spring runs, there were so many fish that were coming up the river that you could literally actually walk across the river by walking on the backs of the fish. So that is now part of legend, and as legends would have it, please don't quote me on that. Many of our families have that story, though. So, so getting on with the presentation, we became engaged with this partnership called the Planning Agreement Partners. Mr. Greacen mentioned those earlier, so I won't repeat those. We were invited to come to the table to participate in this feasibility study part after PG&E declared that they were no longer going to be going for relicensing. We felt it was in the best interest of our tribe to be at the table to represent our interests, and it was mentioned also by Mr. Greacen that we have a water right and fishing rights on the Eel River. In fact, we have a senior water right on the Eel River that's based upon when the reservation was formed. It's based upon the Winters Doctrine that gives the tribes in the area, that gives the tribes in the area rights to the water so that we could live and they have means to live. So anyway, so that goes back to the forming of the reservation. The other thing that was mentioned a little bit ago was the 2-basin solution. So we've been questioned many times over why the tribe would want to even entertain looking at, you know, what's been going on the Russian River side of the mountain. So, but we felt that we were willing to come to the table and look at the science behind the 2-basin solution and looking at all the stakeholders, you know, what exactly does that entail? What exactly does that mean? Looking at the science of the feasibility of how we could restore the Eel River back to its natural state and fix a lot of the things that have happened to it over the years. and have basically decimated our fishery on this side of the mountain, but also keeping in mind that there's needs by stakeholders on the other side of the mountain. So we were willing to come to the table to look at that. And we've been participating in the planning agreement partners since day one. So that, like I said, was questioned, but we felt that it was in the best interest of the tribe to actually come and look at those feasibility studies and be a part and have discussion and have input on those. Let me see. I also wanted to mention that we've been involved with this for many years. So back in 2009, the tribal council at that time passed a resolution that I'd like to just read parts of it. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's very lengthy. But parts of it, I mean, the main part of it is, this resolution was adopted by the Round Valley Tribal Council, declaring the tribe's intent to protect, enhance, and restore the natural vitality and health of the Eel River and its tributaries. A little bit further along, after you get through all the whereases in this resolution, then it also talks about, therefore it is resolved that the Round Valley Indian tribes rejects and withdraws the proposal to settle the conflict of the Potter Valley Project diversion of Eel River water to the Russian River Basin. Be it further resolved that the tribe opposes any discharge and diversion of any water from the Eel River. So the main reason that this was put into place was to show that we really are very serious about trying to restore the Eel River to its natural state. And it was mentioned earlier, too, during this presentation that we are part of the state and federal, what was that called? No, the river, the designation. I'm sorry, I just lost my notes. The Wild and Scenic Rivers by state and federal designation. Thank you. Also included in the resolution that the tribe adopted in 2009 was that the tribes oppose the relicensing of PG&E's Potter Valley Hydroelectric Power Plant, which has diverted water from the Eel River for all of these years since 1908. So this is pretty strong language, and so but I want to point out that we felt that at this stage of the game that we felt that it was in the best interest of the tribe to come to the table and have open discussions with the other partners that were involved, the environmental groups and Potter Valley, and then also Mendocino County, Humboldt County, because we realized that in this day and age there's a lot more stakeholders and there's a lot more at stake. Although we do hold strong, and we have from day one with our resolution that is still in effect, and that we do want to see the Round Valley restored back to its natural health and status of a flowing, wild, and free river. And so as such, one of the very important parts of the fishery and this feasibility study, there's certain parts that was required by FERC with the feasibility study, and there were other parts that we felt were very important, and some of the other stakeholders also felt were very important. And we had, we kind of negotiated what was the best route to go and what needed to be included in the FERC document, and also in the document that didn't, information that didn't necessarily need to be going to FERC. And what I mean by that is that we felt it was very important for our tribe that fishery restoration of the entire Eel River Basin, the entire watershed, be included in any proposal that's going to go forward. And so, I mentioned the Wiyot tribe. We look to the north to the Wiyot tribe also because what's happened on the Eel River, and which basically has decimated the river over all these years, affects not only our tribe up here, but any tribe and the stakeholders below as you go north into Humboldt County. So we felt it was important that we include the tribe itself as a partner, but also that we include the entire Eel River watershed for fishery restoration. So that was very important for us to get in there, and that actually is part of the secondary plan. Let me see. And I also want to emphasize again that the tribe does have a senior water right on the Eel River that has never been adjudicated, but we're hoping that through this process that we can kill a number of birds with a stone, so to speak, that we can come to the table with the stakeholders and have this a part of the discussion. And that language was managed we kept that in there as well. And so with that, I think that my fellow council member, Kat Willits, has a few comments that she would like to make. So I'm going to turn it over to Kat.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be invited into this, and I may not be the most technical person to tell you about how we are engaging in this, but I can tell you I feel as if a lot of people have chances to speak up on what is happening with this water. And for me to have this chance is very prideful, because I feel like the chance that we're taking at this point should have happened years ago, and we weren't even citizens when they were putting this dam in, and the people who were to represent us obviously weren't very passionate about it. So we're going to take this time to do that, and I'm really happy to have the other tribes join in with us. It's a remarkable time for us right now to be able to maybe preserve our water for generations ahead of us. You know, our fishing right is huge. Our people have depended on a language to pass down history, as we didn't have a written history. And the times at the river that our family spends together, our young men with their fathers and uncles and grandfathers, that can't be brought back unless we have the water and we have the fish. So to preserve it for future generations of young children to be able to go swim on a hot day, we don't have that now. We have a flow of water that by the end of July, 1st of August, is toxic to swim in when the algae gets too warm. So the fish can't breathe, the children can't play, they can't spend time together. And to me, culturally, that is heartbreaking. As joining in on this partnership, I think it was great to be able to do that. I appreciated that they held a place for us. It was nice to know that they wanted our opinion on this, because we are greatly affected. And I understand the feelings of particular parties on the other side of the mountain, their concerns of losing their lake, and that they've been there for years, and it's heartbreaking to them. And I've seen a lot of articles where they're saying that, you know, this isn't fair, we shouldn't lose this, we've been here forever, and I understand their concerns. But I think it's very lucky for them to even have the option to speak up when, you know, 100 years ago we did not, and no one spoke for us. So I'm hoping that they will take the time to stop and think about what they're saying and you know, where they're coming from with it, because we've lived it for 100 years. I have, you know, elders who come in and go, you know, honey, how's it going? Are we going to get our water back? And it's something that they've wanted to see for a long time, and their feelings for it have been passed down from their parents. You know, it's truly a fight of the heart and of the soul, and of the things that are wrapped around our people and our culture. You know, and along with that, I would hope that the other side of the mountain would understand that on this side of the mountain we have little towns and we have communities who economically may not be a greatest loss that is shown on paper, but it's a great loss to their families who have lived on it and fished on it, that has supported the wildlife, the bears and the eagles, which, I mean, it's an iconic love of the bear and the eagle in the Indian culture that is supported by that river also. I would like to think that the mindset that we go into this with is that everybody prospers, but usually in these things, we're all going to lose out a little bit. We're willing to see that, but we don't want to see it. you know, as it stands, as Mr. James Russ has spoken about our resolution, and it's very, it's a very well-spoken document. I would love to put that out there for anybody to see it. And our senior water right, I mean, I believe that when they created this reservation, they said, you know, at this point we would like these people to stay in here for whatever reason, but, you know, Uncle Sam said, hey, let's give them something, so, you know, maybe they'll be happy. So they gave us the water right. But to have it taken away again is just, once again, a broken treaty. So we hope to be able to establish that at some point. I will stick with this fight as long as I can. My aunt was a great proponent for water fights, but in her day she was fighting to not have a dam built and not flood our valley. So I can only imagine how the tribes over in Gravelly Valley felt when they were asked to move out of there, and to watch that dam be built was probably very heartbreaking for them. But like I said, I'm more of a passion person. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a biologist. I just know that when I was young, there were many fish and many good times sitting with the uncles and the aunties and fishing and watching them come and go and knowing what they brought and knowing the stories behind it all. That was a very big passion of mine. And I grew up and wanted to come home for what that as a reason to maybe rebuild our family and have those moments where we sit by the river and, you know, hold our nieces and nephews and giggle with our grandmothers. Those days are becoming few and far between for us, and like I said, that's the only way we have to pass on our history. So I won't go on much longer. I know we're cut for time, but I appreciate everyone taking the time to come together today for this and take our Creator's blessing for it.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing about especially the experiences that you've had in working on this project, but also why it's so important for peoples in your region and beyond to think about this as like long-term, right? Like what we're doing for our future generations. And I truly appreciate that perspective, but also the importance of what it's like to live in that space and to be on the ground and see the impacts of water policy and the ways in which we use water on people. Sometimes we sort of forget that there's like people who live through this. And so thank you so much. I did also want to add that we do have another caller who's here, a person on the call, Javier Silva, who is a member of the Sherwood Valley Tribe and their former environmental director, and he's also an advisor to Save California Salmon. So he has some experience on working with the Eel River specifically. And so I don't know, Javier, if you want to take a moment to sort of say a few things based on what you heard or add to it for us before we get to the question and answer portion of the webinar.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I do have some thoughts listening to Kat and the chairperson and Scott, and thank you, everyone. I'm Javier Silva. I am a member of the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo. I am also Noyo and Yokayo descendant. Yokayo is located in the Ukiah Valley on the Russian River side of this two basin discussions. And so on the Sherwood side, Sherwood Valley is a part of the Eel River, the upper Eel River on the south side in Little Lake Valley. So there's some connections to the Eel River that Sherwood Valley maintains, and our Aboriginal territory lies in Sherwood Valley, which is a part of the headwaters as well. So I just wanted to mention that while there is an opportunity for tribes to engage in with other non-tribal entities, there's still the opportunity for tribes to engage with each other first, and I think that should be the first and foremost thing that we get here. While the congressman formed this ad hoc and wants to include everybody, I think that the tribe should do the same as much as possible. And one thing that with working in the North Coast in integrated water management discussions with the counties and with the state, There's just a big hole missing for over 150 years of water. Historical water management and just overall water management policies, as Cutcha had mentioned, is that these are impacting the lives of tribes and have impacted the lives of tribes without their consideration. So these decisions came to divert water, to create dams without the input from the folks who were first here, without their knowledge. And we see the ramifications for that. We see the change in the environment because of that. I still have yet to find what they call a lake, what I call is reservoirs. I've yet to see one that's created with the environment, that's created with groundwater recharge. Tribal knowledge, I think, is missing, and I think the tribes need to lead it. The Russian and the Eel River are hit really hard. Yes, there's agriculture on both sides, but there's more ag on one side with a lot of political clout that are struggling and are failing as well, as far as water management, and tending to the land. So I support what Kat and the chairperson are saying, and I think that there needs to be an effort into getting the tribes on the Russian and the Eel River together and to discussions regarding the impacts of whatever infrastructure has been created there. So with me working in the North Coast, I do work with the North Coast Resource Partnership, and we do have a tribal contingency there. Round Valley has just got selected as representatives on that. We're trying to keep it active. We're trying to keep this topic and any dam removal actually at the top of the list, and keep these tribal reps, keep the tribal reps engaged in those projects. But I think we can use that venue to garner the participation and possibly a partnership dealing with water management in the North Coast here. So those are just some ideas that have been floating around, and I know that there are many tribal reps that are interested in this topic and are willing to, offer their expertise. And like I think there's a good opportunity for resource sharing too. Not one of these tribes, not one of my tribes is able to tackle this big project, but I think all together we would be able to. So that's what I would like to offer. So, but I am here also to help out with any questions and answers as well, as far as I'm concerned too. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have some time for questions and answers, and I wanted to begin by, again, acknowledging everyone's time and saying thank you for sharing and for being a part of this, and for allowing us to hear a little bit more about what's happening on the Eel River. I know if you're from Humboldt County, you likely know about the Eel River. You've seen it. It's such an important part of where we're from. So this is something I think that pertains to a lot of us, and for us to sort of think about the ways in which we can engage with the ongoing issues that are happening throughout our state. I am going to look at the question and answer section right now and try to get to some of these questions. It's kind of open to whoever feels like they can answer the question. I know, I just want to remind people, sometimes it takes a little bit for people to reconnect. So we'll give, I'll ask the question, we'll give people some time to decide who wants to answer and get on to answer, but anyone can answer any of these questions. The first question actually pertains to the San Clemente Dam removal. It said, when San Clemente Dam was removed in Carmel, what were the water security issues for the human residents? So I guess that's getting at kind of what happened with water security for the people of the region after the dam was removed. I don't know if you have an answer to that. I mean, I think that's specifically for Hilanea, so, because you had mentioned the San Clemente Dam removal.
On the video that I found of them talking about the dam, they didn't mention anything of any issues with the water for the people there. Most of it was talking about the like the silt buildup and how they had to get rid of that, and that would have been costly. So I think what they did is they like filled in where the river would have been, and they moved it. They created a different route, and that was one of the things that he mentioned in the video too, was that the fish, there was a tagged really rare species of rainbow trout, I believe is what it was, that swam to the prior location of the dam, and then it went up to where the new location was. And so they found that the fish could figure it out, and there was no issues with them tearing the dam down, but they didn't specifically say anything about the water security regarding the humans. It was mostly the study with the fish.
Thank you so much for that answer. I do appreciate that you brought up kind of that there have been other projects where dams have been removed. Sometimes I don't know how much people know about dam removal and what has happened in other regions. And so dam removal can feel a little bit like, wait, what does that even look like? But there have been several instances of dams being removed, and we're now able to see what that does look like. And I encourage people who are looking into how they can support dam removal projects like the Eel River projects to think about how they can look up other instances of dam removals throughout the world, because this has happened worldwide now. And there's opportunities to kind of see what dam removal truly looks like. And then also how quickly the ecosystem will bounce back once dams are removed. And I think that that's an important thing for us to consider. People sort of will think only about what happens immediately afterwards, but they're looking at how quickly the ecosystem recovers from that and how healthy that can actually be for a number of the species that exist, including human beings, I think, in the region. The next question is, can EQIP funding from NRCS, there's a lot of acronyms, so can EQIP funding from NRCS help pay for some of the dam removal and watershed restoration work?
I am familiar with Eqip, and I would say no, primarily because I wouldn't encourage using that program for these kind of things as well, because it is NRCS is a federally funded program, and I don't know, I think there's probably some disallowances to that, but it's an incentive program, so it's also something that you have to reimburse, or something that you have to show some sort of payback. But yeah, I wouldn't go that route because of the limitations that the funding has on it.
The next question is, PG&E was recently relisted as a public stock. Would it be possible to appeal to shareholders regarding the dam removal or other needed changes? So has anybody had any kind of experience with thinking of PG&E as a public stock now, and what that would mean for working toward dam removal?
Oh, James. Scott, do you have anything on that?
Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Is that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to answer that to a certain extent. This is James Retz, Round Valley Indian Tribes. So my response to that would be, I know PG&E just went through bankruptcy court and all that, and their proposal was accepted, I guess. I don't know a lot about bankruptcy courts, but one thing that I do know that the planning partners were in full agreement on was that not to hold PG&E accountable, that they can't just walk away after making, probably billions of dollars off of everybody on PG&E rates and all that stuff throughout the state and wherever they're located, that they wouldn't just be able to just walk away from this project after taking water out of the Eel River for all these years. And it led to, it wasn't the only reason, but it led to the biggest part of how our fisheries was totally decimated over the years. So we fully intend on holding PG&E accountable for all of these years that they've taken water and sold it and created electricity and all that. So that was one of our many discussions we had on that, and our basically consensus of the group was that we feel very strongly that PG&E needs to be held accountable for not only dam removal, but also looking at, like I mentioned before, at fishery restoration on the Eel River.
Thank you. And Scott, did you want to add anything?
Well, just a general observation that, you know, what bankruptcy does in American legal and economic terms is absolve a debtor from having to pay the people they owe money to. So it's really PG&E ducking out from under, you know, the harms they've done to thousands of people. And it's not the first time they've done it. They blew up San Bruno with their poorly maintained gas line. They burned down Paradise with their poorly maintained power lines. And frankly, one of our core concerns with Scott Dam and Cape Horn Dam for decades has been that PG&E continues to systematically misrepresent and underinvest in the really serious safety problems we see at especially Scott Dam. And I am really concerned that they're going to be let off the hook. I think, frankly, the best we can hope for is that we can make them pay to take these things out and start to at least begin to reverse those harms. Real mitigation, boy, that'd be great.
And our next question is, could people share a little bit more about the two-basin solution and what it includes? And then maybe what the tribe's perspectives on the benefits or challenges of this approach is toward mitigation of what's happening with the dams? So I don't know if we want to start with you, with James and Kathleen, if you guys on what the two basins is, or how the tribes sort of get involved with it, or what they think about it.
So can you repeat the question, Cutcha, please?
Yeah, they're asking if you could share a little bit more about the two-basin solution, a little bit more about what it is, and then what are the tribe's perspectives on the benefits and challenges of this type of approach?
So I guess I could take a shot at that. The two-basin solution was kind of derived from the Congressman, what's his name? Congressman Huffman pulled together an ad hoc committee that was kind of a huge oversight committee, and but anyway, they came up with that term so that we could look at working together with all the stakeholders and looking at both sides of the mountain, on the Eel River side and on the Russian River side. So like I said earlier, the tribe, Round Valley Indian Tribes, was willing to come to the table to kind of look at that and look at the science behind that in terms of looking at a feasibility study and really studying and showing where that leads us and with the science part of that. And that's what we've been referring to it as, by the way, that we want to see during these studies of kind of what the science, where that's leading us in terms of taking out dams or, you know, whatever that entails, but really looking at the science behind it. So one of the folks that was involved with this feasibility study, that they took the lead role, what's the company?
Stillwater.
The Stillwater Company. But anyway, they looked at that, and they have a lot of experience in working on the Eel River. So I think they brought some kind of instant credibility, and all of us agreed that they would be the best company to hire to take a look at the feasibility study. So so we really looked at those studies. But one thing I'd like to mention too, and it kind of rolls back to the last question, with PG&E being held accountable. one of the problems that we had, and I hope I'm not crossing any legal lines here, but one of the problems that we had was we know that PG&E has studies, and it was really hard to get those studies, even after they surrendered and they said they don't want to relicense it. It would have been a big help for us to be able to look at some of those studies, and it was fairly hard to get them. And it took a lot of time, and we didn't have a lot of time to get the feasibility study together. But anyway, we were interested in looking at what the scientists and all those scientific studies looked at, and how that, and from there, looking at that, how that benefited the tribes. So that is still being, it's open for commentary. I think Scott mentioned that earlier. It's open for commentary until today or tomorrow. But anyway, so we're still taking a look at those two from our perspective, our tribal perspective, to see kind of where that's leading us, and then asking questions about certain aspects of that and some of the details. So we're still in that process right now and looking at that. Even though we did submit the feasibility study was submitted to FERC, it takes a while to break all that stuff down and kind of understand what it really means and what it's really telling us.
Cutcha, this is Kat. I was going to add on that PG&E and where we stand with them. I think one of the greatest things that PG&E should owe us, and it should be publicly known because they are serving the public, they have a lot of studies that they wouldn't give to us during all of this. And I think that as, there's an agreement that PG&E and FERC came into with the tribe, obviously, that dates back, and we get updates. But we would really love to be able to have the ability to see all the studies that they've already performed, because, as it's been stated, this is a very expensive process. And if we could have the studies that they already have, we could be a lot farther along, and not to mention there are things with PG&E and the tribe, disclosure agreements that we're trying to dance around, and I feel as a public entity they should be open with us as a tribal sovereign nation.
Thank you. We do have a question from Facebook also. The question from Facebook is...
Well, can I just chime in real quick before we move on? Regarding the two basin solution, which I think from, first of all, they're starting from backwards going up. So you're starting from the problem and then going backwards. So you're saying, oh, we have a two basin problem. So now we need to find a two basin solution. This is my perspective. So the two basin solution is just to pacify, to justify keeping a lot of what the system, basically keeping the water transfer, not so much the dams, but keeping the water transfer going south to Sonoma County and going to the Lake Mendocino. So Scott brought it up regarding Potter Valley, and I think that there was a lot of push for that solution, for that type of agreement, for that feasibility of that by them, so that they can continue to use the water in the way that they've been using. I've been to Potter Valley quite a bit freely, and I think what part of that two basin solution, which is missing, is conservation, changes of land uses, changings of practices. We got vineyards watering at 2 p.m., 3 p.m. It's 100 degrees. They're watering. Why are they watering? They're watering because they need to use that water. If they don't use the water, they're gonna lose it, and they know that. So, as tribe, what I hear from the tribes down here, yes, they are surrounded by vineyards. Yes, there are some tribes that benefit from the industry, but that's just going backwards. And I think from tribes, we need to look at it from the other way. The politics, they can look at it that way, but I think the tribes need to look at it the other way. I agree that, we needed to create our own data. We need to create our own information. It costs a lot of money. We dealt with the same thing with, Caltrans. They don't like to give out a lot of information. We need this information to make better decisions, to help them make better decisions. And they don't want to give that to you because we're gonna show them that they're doing it wrong. So I'd also put it out to, you know, PG&E is the culprit, but I would also keep pushing it out on the state and to the locals. I just went to the state of California. I mean, how many people have profited from this? And where are they at now? They're gone, you know? And so I think it's important that the tribes don't just think of this solution as a solution. It's really just it's just to justify the issues that they have, the problems that they have. That's my perspective. And I'm really interested in, I want to see this feasibility study. I have not yet seen it.
Yeah, I have a little bit I wanted to add to that real quick, is that one thing to remember is that the farmers on the Russian River side don't actually have water rights to the Eel River. And a lot of times the East Fork of the Eel River has much more water in it, which is the diversion, has much more water in it than the Eel River does. And they're using water rights that are just what PG&E didn't use, abandoned water. So waste in this situation and with the grape fields is unacceptable while salmon are dying in the Eel River. Because they don't have water rights, they shouldn't be using that water, and they definitely shouldn't be wasting that water. Yes, there could be a 2-basin solution, but not why they're wasting water on midday watering of grapes or watering grapes in order to keep them from frosting with Eel River water while the salmon are not able to return there. And I had a question and I can't put it in, but if we could get back to it after the Facebook question. And my question is, could we talk a little bit about last time PG&E went bankrupt and how they started returning land to tribes as part of the bankruptcy, and whether or not that is possible with this bankruptcy again? And I want that after the Facebook question, and it's towards Javier mainly.
Hey, I gotta say something.
Okay, go for it.
Scott Greacen-Friends of the Eel. I completely agree with everything you said, Javier. That's entirely correct. And we've been trying to get Potter Valley to, you know, look at their water use and their land use, and they don't want to talk about it. I got to correct something you said, Regina, with great respect. The Potter Valley Irrigation District does have some limited water rights in the Eel. It's important to note that they have those. They have about half of what they originally claimed because they gave them up because they didn't want to spend the money to perfect them. What's really important about them is that they don't have the right to make anybody else bring them that water. They get it by contract from PG&E. So a lot of this is about, yeah, they want it basically for free, or at the very, very cheap rates they're getting now. And I mentioned the proposed pipeline that would bring water from the Lake Mendocino Reservoir back up to Potter Valley. One of the key problems we face in the near future is negotiating over that idea. Now, PVID claims that it makes $34 million a year in profits from Eel River water. They also say they cannot afford a $112 million pipeline. So, you know, we're willing to let them have the water. And I got to make this really clear. We don't want to do that, but we see that as an opportunity to solve this problem in the next 5 to 10 years before we lose steelhead in the upper Eel River. And we're very, very worried about that. And we really, really, really want to see Scott Dam removed so we have a chance for those fish to survive. That seems overwhelmingly important. Having said that, you know, we'd love to see that diversion end, and we may well be going there. So we'll see.
And our Facebook question, I think, is geared toward you, Scott, as well. But if anybody else has information, they wanted to know, what is the next step in the FERC proceeding, and where is that right now, and how can people participate in that process?
Yeah, I posted a link to an action alert from Friends of the Eel River in the questions and answers feed here. If you can't find that, go to eelriver.org, and it's on our website. Basically, what's up right now is an opportunity to comment on the feasibility study report. What we're asking people to do is to say to FERC, yeah, we like the idea of continuing with relicensing and removing Scott Dam, but we need to know more, as I outlined. You know, the point of my presentation was to say, we're really not sure where it goes from here. If the planning group can raise the money to continue relicensing, and we get the kind of deals we need in terms of the cooperative agreement, we'll continue relicensing. If that doesn't work, then we may be on a quick off-ramp to a surrender process. Whether that would be quick is a whole nother question. And that's one of the big reasons that we've collectively, I think, taken the calculated risk of trying for a win-win solution that everybody could get behind. Frankly, I don't think that the ag interests are getting behind it right now. So I'm not convinced that that's going to work, but we'll see.
And as our final question, we'll jump back to Regina's question about PG&E, bankruptcy, and land return. I don't know if there's people on the webinar likely who don't have any background in what that is. So if Javier, you want to share a little bit about what that is and what that was, and then where you think it is at now, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, we were, tribes were given this opportunity in 2000, I can't remember, 2009, 2010, somewhere around there, where PG&E was through the Pacific Land Stewardship Council, I believe it was called, arm of them, to hand out infrastructure or land that was associated with the infrastructure in areas where they're not even using, they're not even profiting, they're just, this is just, you know, projects that are, you know, defunct. And so they said, oh, well, here's some land in these areas, these units, you know, let us know, you know, if you're interested. We, you know, I tried to push my tribal council because I did want to get into that discussion along with Potter Valley Tribe and Round Valley Tribes, and to come into some sort of group into getting some of this land back, because I knew it wasn't just land back. It was, here's some land, but you can't have the water rights to it, and you can't do anything on it, but here's the land so you can go and dance on it or go collect some berries. And that was pretty much it. And so Potter Valley did go through the process, and they are, I think, now just getting, I think they're actually getting this land along the Eel River, 700 acres, that they can't do anything with other than maintain for their hunting and fishing if needed. But so there was that program. You know, I think that I just want to say maybe that's an opportunity that tribes could push. Maybe it should be something that tribes should pursue and say, hey, look, you can't deal with this infrastructure anymore, and this is our Aboriginal homeland, and we would like it back. You know, there's a lot to it. So that's most of what I know about what's going on. I know Potter Valley tribe has been put into a position where they feel politically pressured not to oppose or not to get involved in this hydroelectric project because of that land transfer or whatever. But anyways, you know, I think they would know more about that, but and going through that process. I think they was also doing some, Pit River Tribe also acquired some other land too from PG&E. So, you know, and back to the, you know, two basin solution. And I just wanted to say that, that I think that what Regina had brought up, and I can't remember exactly what we were getting at, Regina, was, and remind me, I guess, we were talking about the land get back, but there was another point that you had brought up that I wanted to elaborate more on, about the two basin solution. Oh no, I think it's more into the water transfer. Sorry, it was what Scott said about, you know, transferring back, or what's going to happen with this. The water's coming from the Eel through Potter Valley and coming down to the lake, to the reservoir Mendocino, and they're proposing to send it back up to Potter Valley. However, that'll give them and justify them to allow that dam to be raised as well. So I also wanted to bring that up because sometimes we are left out of all the information that and all the details because they're not associated with each other. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there because the first step is, in water management is they do these things. They do, hey, we need this here. No, oh, now we're going to move it down more. No, we need more. And that's just what happened. So, and we left with, in the dark.
So we have time for maybe one or two more statements. So James and Kathleen, I know that a lot of people who are on these calls, they tend to reach out about, well, what can we do in support of the tribes and the things that they're trying to do with these issues? And is there anything in particular that you would like people on the webinar to know about what they could do, or where they could focus their supportive efforts, or what you would like to see sort of people kind of step forward to try and do to kind of help you all for the work that you're doing? So this is for James and Kathleen.
Hey, Cutcha, this is Kathleen. One of the things that would help us along is to voice how important it is to have that water on this side of the mountain. We have a lot of people on the other side of the mountain that say that they need the water and that they have to have the diversion, and they need so many feet throughout the summer. But on this side, we have no one speaking up to our congressmen or our senators. Congressman Huffman would love to have some feedback, and Senator McGuire would love to have feedback. We need to have the support that shows that even though we have less people on this side of the river, it's just as important that our voices are heard. Any positive media that they can produce. We have a lot of negative media coming from the other side about the dam removal, because I don't believe that our side of the mountain is being heard, that it was tough to live through this 100 years of having it there. So any time that they can speak up and understand that we're not taking all of the water that goes down that side of the mountain away, we're just saying that possibly let's only do it when there's enough water to go that way, and not sacrifice what we have in our rivers for our fish and our families and our wildlife.
Yeah, I would just like to add just a couple of statements to that as well. That we do need that advocacy on this side of the river. Earlier I mentioned that the tribe, we were looking out for our best interest, and one of the things I meant by that was that we don't get a lot of our perspective into these discussions, and that's one of the main reasons we felt that it was very important for Round Valley Indian tribes to be at the table with these other groups and other stakeholders to really put our perspective out there and to let them know kind of where we're coming from, and also the state that the river is in right now. I mean, right now, and during this summer, it's coming up on summer, in June, there's places on the river as you're driving in to come into Round Valley that you could literally almost jump over, and the river is so low. And so that's not conducive to the fishery at all. It's very detrimental. And so, you know, we can't make it rain or anything like that, but we can have better practices. And I totally agree with what Javier was talking about a little bit earlier when he mentioned water conservation, different practices. So when I mentioned fishery restoration, that was super important for our tribe to include that and have that included as part of this overall discussion. That included, I didn't say that specifically, but I included, that was like inferred or implied, I'm sorry, from me that that's part of the restoration, not only to fix what's been damaged, but to have different practices and look at different ways that we can to manage the water and to manage the river to bring it all back into a healthy state. So that's all together, but I appreciate his comments on that too.
Well, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today and for listening and also presenting. I know we have to navigate a lot of different issues, especially right now when we're thinking about connections and the ways in which we can bring people together. And I wanted to remind everybody that this webinar, as well as the others of our webinars, are available on our YouTube page. And so if you go to the HSU Native American Studies YouTube page, you will find all of the posts of our previous speaker series. You can watch them all if you would like to. It's an opportunity, I think, for people to kind of catch up on where we're at, but also look at kind of what we've been doing. I wanted to remind people who are registered for the certificate series that we would really appreciate if you fill out your evaluation form. That is helpful to us, but also helps us so that we know you're meeting the requirements of the series. And to let everybody know that this is the end of the first module, which was to look at the state of California salmon and what was happening on the different rivers and watersheds right now. We're going into our second module starting next week. So we're doing this every Friday throughout the summer. And module 2 will be culture, advocacy, and environmental justice. And the series features things around grassroots advocacy, art, the ways in which people protect land, water, and life through art as activism, cultural revitalization on the water with canoe traditions, looking at food sovereignty and the river, and then finally connections between health and environmental justice. And so our next module will begin next week, same time, Fridays from 12 to 1:30. It will be available Facebook Live. You can register to attend the webinar, or you can also watch them on our YouTube page if you search Humboldt State University Native American Studies. And we do post links to the videos on the Save California Salmon website, as well as the Save California Salmon Facebook. And if you're wondering about the presentations and things for today, they will also be up on the website. So I encourage you to visit the Save California Salmon website as well. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you all next week, to hearing from you, and to seeing what we can do when we come together to really look at the state of California salmon and how we can be the voices for our salmon and for our more than human relatives who need us and our waters that need us as well. So thank you very much.